I'm not sure I remember everything she said, but the one last comment she made about Jesus, I'm a Presbyterian as well, by the way, and at one point Presbyterians believed in supersessionism, that Jesus came to complete the prophecies and so forth, and I don't believe that. I believe that we are all the children of God, Muslims, Christians, and Jews, and the other religions as well. Every human being is a child of God.
Isam, and then.
I think in addition to trying to educate ourselves as Americans, it's very important that we speak up. It's important for us to realize that our country is the #1 supporter of the state of Israel. We give them billions of dollars every year. We give them a lot of hardware that kills these poor people. So it is important that we speak to our elected officials. We tell them that we don't like that, and if they should not be re-elected, we should put our money where our mouth is, by having to elect individuals who represent the truth, who represent the right of the Palestinians for their own homeland.
You mentioned that we really need to dismantle Zionism as a way to peace. And as you think about what that means, can you talk about what that might mean in this country to dismantle racism?
Okay, so the question, if those of you in the back couldn't hear, is he's mentioned dismantling of Zionism, and how does that relate to dismantling of racism in the United States?
Is that for me? Okay. Well, basically, when I say dismantling Zionism, is basically a racist or supremacist ideology, just like in the case of Nazi Germany, okay, with the Nazi regime. You know, you cannot have, a lot of people, well, why don't you have peace, or why don't you talk, or why don't we sit at the table, or why don't you dialogue with these people? Would the Jews dialogue with Hitler or the Nazi regime? Would they sit down and work out a peace plan? Would Netanyahu have, at that time, somebody similar to him have sat down with Hitler? This is what I mean. So I think it is nonsense when we just use the term peace loosely without having a concrete idea or a concrete proposal about peace, because there must be justice. Let's be very clear about that. Before there's peace, you have to have justice. Right? There are war criminals, there are perpetrators, they must be held accountable. You cannot continue to say peace, let's sit here, let's sit there. That's what I mean. In the context of the United States, it's like in the Black Civil Rights Movement, okay? You cannot continue in this country to have black people being oppressed. Black people not having the right to vote, no women's right, for instance. This is what I mean in the context. Dismantle that supremacist ideology all around. I hope that answers that.
I would like to sort of add a little bit on what Abbas just said. There are many flavors of Zionism, and to some people it's a very dear thing, and they don't like to hear what Abbas said. And I think Abbas is talking about the political Zionism as practiced by the State of Israel, which is racist. And as far as racism in this country, I would all recommend that you read a book, The Invention of the White Nation. The author's last name is Batalora. It talks about the invention of the concept of a white person. And it was done by the wealthy people in this country to keep down the other people. At one point, Irish and Italians were black. And later on they became defined as white. And so our system in this country is designed to keep people down, and we need to fight that, whether we're black, brown, or anything in between.
What was that book?
The Invention of the White Race, and the last name is Batalora, Batalora.
Okay, so I have a few hands. Reverend Beatty? Yes. And then Nina? And Kim?
Jeff, did you? First of all, I want to make a plea for volunteers. When I was at the City Council of Akron, and Akron is about as far away in understanding the Israeli-Palestinian situation as the Republicans are understanding it. Our mayor presented to the City Council last Monday night 7 p.m., a fait accompli that he had made an arrangement with 3 or 4 or 5 Israeli companies to guard our water supply, to redo our sewage so that it can be spread on farmlands, not quite potable water, but close to it, with a new technology. And it was approved 100% by our city council. I would like to confront that. I cannot, because I belong to Sustainable Akron, and we're trying to get the city council to come along with us to reestablish our human rights as citizens of Akron, to determine where the gas and oil wells will be in our neighborhoods or not be in our neighborhoods. Right now, the wells are going up in each neighborhood, mainly in churches, parking lots, and so forth. And we're right at the point of trying to get the city council to go along with us. I don't think they will, but others in my group think they will. We need volunteers to come down from Cleveland, the Cleveland area, to come down here and confront. And you get 3 minutes. Anybody can come in and speak to the city council for 3 minutes about this situation. See me afterwards. The question I have, many think that the war for justice and peace in Palestine, Israel, will not be won there, but in the United States. And I see many collusions between the people like Joe Canfor of Gojo and Mayor Plisquelli, and these businesses are coming in to maintain our resources for us as a way of cementing the economic ties, similar to the way the settlements are cementing the expulsion and the oppression of the Palestinians in Palestine, Israel. Is the war going to be won here for justice and peace, or will it be over there?
Well, I don't think anybody can foresee that particular future on where the battlefield for justice for Palestinians, where will it be? I will say this, though. I will say that I believe that here in the United States, it's an important one. I will say that we will have a great effect on liberating Palestine or on ending the occupation. Our work here, obviously the United States has its colonies set up across the earth. So I think the fight is here. I think it's very important that we fight. So I think it will be initiated here. Now where it ends up, whether it'll be with dialogue, whether it'll be ending up militarily on the ground, I have no idea. But I think that we here have a pivotal role. And we have an important role because our money, as the gentleman back there, Assam says, our money funds the occupation. We are killing those babies in the Gaza Strip with our hard-earned income taxes. Every year, we've just filed taxes. That money will unfortunately go to the Israeli military to continue their illegal occupation on the Palestinians. It will go and bomb the large civilian population in the Gaza Strip. That is the largest open-air prison in the world today. So the fight must be fought here. It's very important.
The way I see it, our struggle here in the United States should be so that we as a country and as individuals are not guilty of any actions that promote the occupation in Palestine or elsewhere. I want to remind all of us, though, that the Israelis are very intelligent people. The government is. If they lost all our support from the United States, I'm sure they'll find another supporter. As a matter of fact, they're thinking of making connections with China, Japan, and India. But our responsibility, I agree with Abbas, our responsibility is for us as Americans. We need to make sure that our government is not complicit in what is going on.
Absolutely.
So before I call on the next few people, I want to pipe in a little bit because of what you said, whether it's going to be fought militarily or politically. Just remember that war doesn't decide who's right, only who's left.
Very good.
Okay. Got Nina, then Jeff, then Kim, and then, I don't remember your name, but
I wanted to follow up on what Sam said and what you've talked about, the need to change in this country. And that's a tough one, as we know, because public opinion has been really dominated by a media that is influenced very much by Israel and AIPAC. One of the things I think that we could all do, in addition to what Sam said about contacting Congress, we need to have more education, and we can each do that. And there are resources. For example, Peace Action and some other groups recently this fall brought in Alice Rothschild, who maybe a number of you heard her, and we showed her movie, Voices Across the Divide, at the Cleveland Art Museum. And she spoke at that. And you can get that DVD, and it tells, as our guests here today have told their stories, it raises up a Palestinian narrative. And I would encourage you to go on her website, Alice Rothschild, and you can order a copy of the DVD, and also Peace Action can make it available if you don't want to pay for it. So we're very happy to do that, and if you contact our office, we'll see that you can get a copy of that. Then you can invite people to your home, and they can begin to hear a different story.
thank you. Kim, then Jeff.
Abbas, I went to the protest at Crocker Park and at the Jewish Federation in smaller than the public square. I didn't see anybody over 30 at the mic for the first part of these protests. You get discouraged about the older generation of Palestinians, perhaps. What was your reaction, and what the Palestinians kids like, and what possesses them?
Are you saying that as far as the mic went?
No, I'm just saying the kids were really standing up. They were college kids.
Yes, absolutely.
What was your impression?
I think, I think as far as the Palestinian movement here in the United States, largely it attracts the youth, especially here in Cleveland. I think that is part due to the older generation kind of being a bit tired as far as the Palestinians, we have to admit. And I'm not saying all the older generations like me and Dr. Nahida, but I just turned 40, by the way, so it's a different bracket for being in my 30s. But so maybe now I'm going into that older generation, and then there's the older generation. But I don't think that the older generation, as far as in the context that you're speaking about, that they're giving up. I just think that a lot of them are tired. And a lot of them feel, I'm going to be honest with you, a lot of Palestinians, a lot of Arabs in general, feel that talk is cheap, feel that a lot of the protests, a lot of the things that we do not have an effect. They're like, okay, we go to the streets, we hold the signs, stop bombing Gaza, and the next day you hear that, Khan Yunis was wiped off the map. You know what I mean? So they're really tired of this. They in their minds, they think that what we do, even here, me speaking, what effect? I mean, they like the idea. They like you being patriotic, paying tribute to your homeland, not forgetting your father, your grandparents, like in my case, and their struggle, and how we pass on the struggle to the other. But at the same time, I just think that a lot of them do not think that it's really working. So this is why you see the youth coming out. And I think that is important, because it is always the youth. If you look at Kent State, if you look at the anti-war movement, a lot of them were college students. A lot of people here in America, the civil rights movement, a lot of them were young people. If you look at Dr. Martin Luther King, he was under 40 when he was assassinated. Same thing for Malcolm X. So these people were not the older generation. Dr. King and Malcolm X were fairly young.
Yeah. Okay. Jeff?
Yes. Okay, we're aware of a political Zionist ideology, which the full development of which calls for a pure Jewish state. What this means in our minds is that the goal is to remove as many Palestinians as possible so that they can forever control their destiny as Jews. we're aware of this as being a force to be reckoned with, this political Zionism. But the Palestinians have a liberation ideology. Please tell us, does this Palestinian ideology permit Jews who currently live in what is now the State of Israel to continue if and when there is a peace agreement and Palestinians have full rights? Is this, I mean, are you the exact opposite of the political Zionist ideology in that you want just a Palestinian state? Or are you willing to, tell us, are you willing to live with Jewish people who are currently there?
I think I sort of answered that question much earlier. We're willing to live together. We have to live together.
Well, the reason I asked it a second time is because it's automatically the accepted wisdom that they want to push us into the sea. We can't make a deal with the Palestinians because if we do, we're dead. Okay, so I would like you to address that.
Thank you. There's several issues here, and one, I want to remind the audience that Netanyahu loves to conflate Judaism with Zionism, and a lot of Jews in this country really do reject that concept. I know the Presbyterian Church divested from 3 American companies that do business in the occupied territories, and one of our biggest supporters were the young people from Jewish Voice for Peace. They were our partners completely in the activity. As far as being pushed out to sea, I think I demonstrated it's really the other way around. This is a talking point, a propaganda point. And we also have to admit that a lot of Jews and Israelis as well, and even Jews living in this country consider themselves atheists. I had a friend who told that to me. They have a lot of concerns about being wiped out by Christians from the West. They're afraid of Christians from the West. They see us as being bigoted and racist. And they have a legitimate fear. And part of the solution is somehow to answer that fear. And what I would hope for is that when it does become one country with equal rights for everyone, that we follow the South African model and we don't start getting even with each other. There has to be reconciliation. We have to be able to live together. Otherwise, it just wouldn't work.
Yeah, I want to answer a little bit on that too. I think Jeff wanted me to answer as well. Is that correct?
And then I have about 4 hands up, so I'm going to try to get
We
people.
do have extra time. They've allotted us extra time till 5:30.
Well, no, we have to be totally out by 5:30. They close at 5:30.
Well, they've allotted us extra time, so we don't have to rush now.
But I'm trying to keep track of the hands I've seen.
Okay. Well, again, I will reiterate a little bit of what Dr. Nahida said as well. I think we get asked that a lot. I co-founded Al-Auda, which is the Return, the Palestine Right to Return Coalition. And the reason why we founded that is because we've had mainstream Arab organizations before that, like the Arab American Institute. We had the ADC, American Arab Anti-Discrimination Committee, which never really focused on Palestine. So we needed a venue to focus on Palestine and to focus on the return, and that's why we came about. So people always ask us, we get asked these questions all the time. So what about after liberation? Or after, what about the Jews living there? Do we kick them out? Do we send them home? I think first, before we can think about any of that, you have to fight for ending the occupation. So first things come first. You have to fight the occupation. You have to have basically fair treatment of all people on the land. It is something that I guess that can be worked into place, but obviously what Dr. Nahida said makes sense. If you're going to live there in Palestine and you're going to live in the land, people have to get along. And the ideology, or the way it is now, cannot remain. Israel cannot remain to oppress people. Every time they, first of all, you have to think of the occupation. When somebody comes into your home with a gun, they don't mean peace. If I'm coming to your house and I'm taking over your house, I have no intention of peace. Palestine was ethnically cleansed, or is being ethnically cleansed, and it's ongoing. It's the longest occupation that has been going on since 1948. So there was not a blueprint for peace when they came to Palestine and took the people out. There was no blueprint for peace. This is something we need to understand. This is a deception tactic, like Dr. Nahida was saying earlier. This is something, I'm surprised that nobody in the audience got up and said, what about Hamas? So I think this is a big victory, that a lot of this is kind of being cleaned out. I was actually expecting somebody in the audience to say, well, what about Hamas? What about the buses? What about killing this and killing, you know, these are things and lies and deceptions that we always used to hear. And this is when the thing comes into place where they, you know, the Jewish question or the delusion that God all of a sudden became a real estate. You know, well, ISIS has the same ideology. You know, they're in Syria and they want to take over Iraq and they want to, and I'm a Muslim. And I say that is not Islam, okay, that is against Islam. And all that is obviously here today in this country is fueling Islamophobia across the map. And this is something else that is serious that we have to combat. Regardless, we know where it all started from. We know who put it in place, and we understand that. But, they even have it online, they call it JISL, the Jewish whatever in the Levant. Okay, they actually mock this on Twitter. So this is the same thing. If they want to use religion, well, ISIS is using religion. Is that what we really want? You know, obviously, yes, one people, one nation, equal treatment for all people, and respect the indigenous people of the land.
Okay, so I was asked to make an announcement that the Food Not Bombs food will only be here till 4:30, even though we could stay later than that. This program was scheduled to go only till 4, but we can stay later. There's obviously interest in continuing to talk. So I'm going to call on you, then you, then you, and then somebody in the back. Okay, so yes.
Anybody care? Well, I agree with what you're saying about no justice.
Wait, can we have the din go down so we can hear the question?
And it seems to me the battlefield is really all over the world.
Yes.
It's in Europe, it's in this country.
Do you want to eat?
And wherever you are is where you have to do your fighting. You can't go fight in Palestine.
No.
It seems to me, though, there's been a really large dearth of presence of the Palestinian voice by Palestinians. There's a lot online, but I don't think that counts so much. I read in the newspaper letters all the time, but I don't ever remember a Palestinian writing to the newspaper on the question of Palestine-Israel. It seems like the only Palestinian voice we hear is Abbas, right? That's the only spokesperson we ever hear for Palestine. And I know there's a lot of Palestinians in this country, and maybe I'm missing something. I know there were the demonstrations around Gaza. I saw them. That was brief. Poof. You know, there doesn't seem to be any significant, strong, consistent, ongoing voice of Palestinians on this question in this country, and there are millions.
I'd like you to look into who owns most of the media in this country.
No.
And wait a minute, I would like to tell you about my personal experiences writing. You write a letter to the editor, and the editor has the ability to turn it down. I have seen lots of letters to the editor from Palestinians. Quite often we get turned down. I had an experience where I was interviewed by the Akron Beacon Journal, and I told my story, and another person from my church also told this story. His entered was printed and mine wasn't. So we have voices, we speak. They have to be heard.
I think, let me answer that as well. I think I understand where he's coming from. He's not saying that they're not voices in particular. Of course, there was Dr. Edward Said, some of you have heard, who came a very long way intellectually with bringing Palestine onto the question, where his office was burned down numerous times and things like that. And you also have college professors and, of course, like Dr. Nahida, who speak. I think you're talking about as far as the movement, where protests and continued, where it's when Gaza, when you have 3,000 people being massacred in 51 days, the Palestinians are compelled, everybody wants to come out, everybody wants to do something to stop the madness. What I think he's saying is after that happens, there is a calm as far as activities surrounding Palestine. And I think that's very true. And that's something that's an ongoing internal problem with us, because that's what we're trying to constantly do, is that we have to play offense too. It's not always defense. It's not always when they're killing us we're going out to the streets. We have to be consistent, and we have to grow the movement. And as far as a Palestinian activist who's been active for over 20 years in this country, I've seen this problem a long time. It's very difficult for us here in America to kind of give the genuine Palestinian narrative, because it was always knocked down. It was always, okay, we'll take a little bit of Palestine, but when you talk about the right of return, nah, come on, we can't have that. Because now you want to erase the geography, and now you're a threat to an existence. You know, well, that's not my problem, because I'm the threat.
How about the boycott movement?
Exactly. You have the BDS. Well, you have that. That's actually very successful. The BDS movement is successful not only in this country, in Europe as well, and I think all around. It could be stronger. BDS is not the final narrative or not the final solution, but it's certainly very effective. It's certainly that's something that we're proud of, and my organization was one of the signers of the Palestinian civil societies that have been going on since 2005 with the BDS movement. But we need to have a consistency, and this is where we need the help of the non-Palestinian circle to stand with us and to fight for justice.